Welcome to this custom deep dive. Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of precision. Like, it feels kind of like engineering.
Right.
You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points to the screen and says, well, there it is.
It's a totally binary state. It's either broken or not broken.
Exactly. And the path from that image to the actual treatment is clean. There's this straight, unbroken line connecting a clinician's decision to a patient's outcome.
We find a lot of comfort in that straight line, I think. We like medical interventions to be visible, to be easily categorized.
Yeah, we want to know who made the call.
Most importantly, yeah. We like to know without a shadow of a doubt who is actually in charge of that outcome. So if something goes wrong, we know exactly who to look at.
But then, you step into the modern world of artificial intelligence and healthcare, and suddenly that simple x-ray machine is broken. We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that has become incredibly murky.
Oh, absolutely. It's totally shifted.
So, today's mission for you, the listener, is to unpack a really timely and vital piece of writing. It's titled Diffusion of Responsibility: Preserving Accountability in Healthcare AI.
It's a fascinating read.
It really is. We're going to explore how AI is quietly reshaping who takes the blame and, well, who actually holds the power when medical decisions go sideways.
Right, because if traditional medicine is that clear X-ray, AI acts a lot more like a shattered mirror.
A shattered mirror. I like that analogy.
Yeah, it takes a single medical decision
Yeah.
and just fractures it across dozens of different, totally invisible players.
So what is the paper's core take on that?
Well, the paper makes a really compelling case that AI does far more than just, introduce a little bit of technical ambiguity into a hospital.
Okay, so it's bigger than that.
Way bigger. It fundamentally redistributes action across complex systems.
Hmm.
And it does this at a speed that our traditional models of responsibility just, they simply cannot keep up with.
Wow, okay, so it's moving too fast for the old rules.
Exactly. And the consequence of that setup is this very specific, really dangerous illusion that we need to keep our eyes on today.
Which is?
It's the illusion that accountability still exists in a room simply because a human being happens to be standing there.
Wow. Okay, so let's trace how a single decision actually gets chopped up like that. Because for a patient walking into a hospital today, the physical environment looks completely identical to how it looked, 10 years ago.
Oh, sure. You still see the same things?
Right. You still see a doctor in a white coat. You still see a nurse checking your chart.
The physical environment hasn't changed at all. But the architecture beneath it has been entirely rewritten.
So how does that work in practice?
Well, in an AI-enabled healthcare system, a decision is rarely made in one single place anymore. Responsibility is distributed across these distinct layers.
Distinct layers.
Yeah, and the source text breaks this down to show how algorithmic opacity actually plays out. So first, you have the data layer. The data used to train the AI is collected and scrubbed by one entity, often a massive tech conglomerate or like a third-party aggregator.
Right, and those aggregators are making active choices about what data to include and what to strip out. Right.
Exactly.
Like they might strip out a nurse's qualitative note about a patient, looking pale,
Yeah.
and only keep the raw blood pressure numbers.
Which means context is already being erased at layer one. The nuance is gone.
Right.
Then that data moves to the model layer. The AI itself is trained by a completely different team of data scientists.
Wait, different from the data collectors.
Totally different. These engineers are tuning the algorithm, deciding on the mathematical weights.
Okay, what does that mean for the patient?
Well, they might prioritize sensitivity over specificity, meaning they tune the AI to flag absolutely everything just to avoid missing a diagnosis.
Which inevitably leads to a massive increase in false alarms.
Exactly. Alarm fatigue is a huge issue.
Wait, so the engineers who have literally never set foot in your local hospital are the ones setting the baseline threshold for what constitutes a medical emergency.
That is the operational reality.
Right.
But it doesn't even stop there. Next comes the workflow layer.
The workflow layer.
Yeah, the clinical interface. So how that AI tool actually pops up on a doctor's screen is designed by a software vendor.
Oh, like the UI designers?
Right. A user interface designer decides whether a sepsis alert is, say, a soft yellow nudge on a screen or a hard red stop that literally freezes the computer until the doctor clicks acknowledge.
Wow. And that design choice is, in itself, basically a medical intervention.
because it dictates human behavior in the moment.
Exactly.
And finally, you have the hospital's own institutional constraints layered on top of all that.
Like hospital policy.
Right. Administrators decide which departments even get the tool and how it integrates with their specific rules. So by the time you reach the very end of this massive invisible assembly line, a clinician is asked to validate an output they did not generate based on data they never saw, using an algorithm they simply cannot unpack.
Man, it's like an assembly line where the final inspector is blindfolded, but they're still handed a pen and forced to sign the safety certificate anyway.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
Every single layer controls a tiny fraction of the system.
But absolutely nobody controls the whole thing.
No single layer owns the entire decision.
But wait, I have to push back here a little bit. Isn't this just classic human nature?
And how do you mean?
Like, when a patient gets harmed, say the AI misses a critical marker for sepsis, every actor in that chain is obviously going to point the finger at someone else just to dodge a lawsuit.
Sure, people want to avoid getting sued.
Right. The data guys blame the UI designers. The UI designers blame the doctor for not catching it. Why is this specifically an AI problem rather than just, corporate buck passing?
So the source text actually explicitly rejects the idea that this is just human evasion. This is what the author calls structural diffusion.
Structural diffusion. Okay.
Yeah. The system is quite literally built in a way where ownership is impossible. The lack of accountability is an architectural reality. It's baked into the code and the procurement contracts.
Oh, so it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Exactly. When the data scientist says, hey, that part wasn't mine, they're stating a factual reality. When the doctor says, I didn't design the algorithm and I don't know how it arrived at this conclusion, they're also stating a factual reality.
So it's not just a convenient excuse.
No, it is a core feature of how modern distributed software is engineered.
Wow. So if responsibility is fundamentally scattered across all these invisible layers, how do hospital administrators currently justify rolling these tools out at lightning speed? They must have some kind of framework they're presenting to regulators to, pretend this is all safe.
They do, and the justification revolves almost entirely around this concept called human oversight.
Human oversight.
Right. Healthcare organizations defend the deployment of this opaque AI by arguing that because there is a clinician in the room watching the screen, accountability is preserved.
I see.
The logic basically goes, if a human can theoretically intervene, the system is fundamentally safe.
But the source calls that a complete fiction, doesn't it? How does that oversight actually fail in practice?
It fails for highly practical operational reasons. First of all, decisions just happen too quickly to be meaningfully interrupted.
Because it's a computer.
Right, an AI processes millions of data points and updates a patient's risk profile in milliseconds. And second, the system's outputs often arrive after downstream actions have already been triggered.
Okay, let's walk through what that actually looks like on the floor for you. Say it's, 2:00 a.m. on a really busy Tuesday in the ICU.
Perfect example. Exactly 2:00 a.m., the algorithm detects a really subtle pattern in a patient's vitals and flags a high probability of sepsis.
Okay.
But the AI doesn't just, send a test message to the doctor. It's integrated into the hospital's broader digital infrastructure.
So it takes action.
Yes. By 2.0 in 3 seconds, an automated protocol might already queue up a broad-spectrum antibiotic order in the pharmacy system, notify a rapid response nursing team, and alter the hospital's bed management queue to prepare for an ICU transfer.
All in 3 seconds. And then the doctor walks into the room at, say, 2:02 a.m.
The doctor walks in, sees the alert, and now had to somehow reverse engineer the invisible math of an opaque algorithm, while a rapid response team is already standing out in the hallway waiting for the go-ahead.
Oh man, that totally brings up the professional pressure the text mentions. If you are that doctor, maybe you're a tired resident on hour 14 of your shift, and you decide to override an AI system that the hospital just spent $50 million integrating.
You're taking a huge risk.
Yeah, you are putting your medical license and your career on the line if you turn out to be wrong.
It's an impossible position.
It's like being strapped into the passenger seat of a self-driving car. The car has no steering wheel, and it has absolutely no brake pedal, but the dealership slaps you on the shoulder and says, hey, you're the human oversight.
Right, good luck.
And then, when the car inevitably blows through a red light and hits someone, the police officer walks right past the car manufacturer and just hands you the ticket.
That is exactly it. And the consequence of that setup is what the text calls a liability shield.
A liability shield for who?
For the vendors and the institutions. A human who can observe an AI but cannot meaningfully intervene does not provide accountability. They merely provide cover.
Oh, wow.
The hospital gets the operational efficiency, the tech company gets the software subscription profit, and the individual doctor absorbs the entirety of the legal and moral blame.
That connects directly to this core concept of authority that the author introduces, right? The paper states that accountability is mathematically inseparable from authority.
They are two sides of the exact same coin. If a clinician is going to be held responsible for an outcome, they absolutely must possess the authority to override the system.
Which means having the actual power to stop it.
Yes, they must have the technical ability to slow down the decision process. And crucially, they need institutional protection when they exercise their own clinical judgment against the automation.
Because you can't hold someone responsible for a train they literally cannot stop.
Exactly. Without the right to pause and protection from retaliation, holding a clinician responsible is purely symbolic.
Just a paper exercise.
Right. We are currently preserving the expectation of responsibility while quietly stripping away the authority to act.
And that need for a pause button directly collides with the main reason hospitals buy AI in the first place, which is speed.
Oh, absolutely. The whole marketing pitch for healthcare AI is that it accelerates everything.
Faster triage in the emergency room, faster diagnosis of MRI scans, faster patient discharge. It's all about speed.
Speed is celebrated as an unqualified good, but the source warns that this creates a massive speed trap.
A speed trap? How so?
Well, as the decision cycles within a hospital accelerate, human reflection suddenly becomes this incredible liability to the system's momentum.
Because you're slowing it down.
Right. As the digital infrastructure speeds up, the windows for a human to critically evaluate and alert and escalate a concern get narrower and narrower.
And so, intervention gets completely reframed. If the AI is built to clear patient beds as fast as possible to maximize revenue, a doctor pausing to question a discharge recommendation isn't viewed as a careful, diligent professional anymore.
Not at all.
They are viewed by the system, and often by hospital administrators, let's be real, as a bottleneck. They are actively lowering the efficiency metrics.
Action outpaces responsibility. When systems privilege momentum over human judgment, the physical consequences of a decision ripple out way before anyone can even verify the logic.
Wait, so if the core issue is that the system moves way too fast to control in the moment, what about all the compliance measures hospitals use?
What kind of measures?
You know, they have audit trails, compliance departments, post-hoc case reviews. Don't those track what went wrong and ensure someone is held accountable eventually?
The source material draws a very sharp distinction here between governance and documentation.
Okay, what's the difference?
All of those measures you just listed, the audit trails, the compliance reviews, they only appear after the harm has already occurred.
They are entirely looking in the rearview mirror.
Exactly. Accountability that appears only after a patient has suffered an adverse outcome is not governance, it is documentation.
Just writing down what went wrong.
True accountability has to exist at the time of the decision when the outcome is still reversible. A digital log file showing exactly how an algorithm made a fatal miscalculation at 2:04 a.m. is technically an audit trail, sure.
But it doesn't help the patient.
It's just a receipt for the lawsuit. It is entirely useless to the patient in the bed. True governance requires designing systems that actually invite human judgment before the consequences are locked in.
So if the system is moving way too fast to be governed in real time, and accountability is just a retroactive paper trail to satisfy the lawyers, someone has to be absorbing the physical and emotional impact of this flawed design right now.
They absolutely are. The clinicians are absorbing the strain. The doctors, the nurses, the respiratory technicians.
It all falls on them.
It does. They are expected to trust systems they cannot interrogate, defend patient outcomes that they did not shape, and just absorb the blame without any structural support.
Man, going into work every single day knowing you are legally on the hook for a black box you don't even control, that must take a massive psychological toll.
It does, and the text highlights a really necessary paradigm shift in how we view the current crisis in medicine.
You mean the burnout crisis?
Yeah. Right now, clinician burnout is widely framed by institutions as an individual resilience issue. Doctors are prescribed more yoga or mandatory mindfulness modules, or told to get better sleep.
As if the problem is just that they aren't tough enough to handle the modern workload.
Right, but the author argues that this burnout is actually a catastrophic governance failure. Human beings naturally disengage when they are held perpetually responsible without being empowered to actually act.
It just erodes your professional integrity at a fundamental level.
Exactly.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Normally, when a technology is this fundamentally broken, when it is actively harming the workforce and creating these opaque risks, the default assumption is that the free market will just weed it out.
The free market argument, yeah.
Right. A hospital buys a bad AI, patients suffer, they switch vendors, and the tech company is forced to adapt or they go out of business. Why isn't that happening here?
The text dismantles the free market argument completely, pointing out three specific structural realities that prevent the market from self-correcting.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is a total lack of patient choice. If you are rushed to the emergency room with a heart attack, you are not in a position to shop around.
No, you're definitely not.
You can't ask the triage nurse, which software vendor provides your predictive analytics. You are literally just trying to survive the hour.
Right, you are a captive audience to whatever algorithms that specific hospital happens to have purchased years ago.
Exactly. The second reason is vendor lock-in at the institutional level. Hospital IT infrastructure is incredibly complex.
Oh, I'm sure.
When a hospital integrates an electronic health record system, it takes years and costs hundreds of millions of dollars. They train thousands of staff members on that specific interface.
Right, you can't just unplug it.
No, they cannot simply rip out their entire IT backbone just because one proprietary AI module is producing opaque results. They are locked into these multi-year contracts that make switching vendors practically impossible in the short term.
And the third reason?
The third, and perhaps the most dangerous reason, is that failures in healthcare AI are practically invisible.
Invisible? How?
We are not talking about a bridge collapsing, where everyone sees the structure fall, and the failure is totally undeniable.
Right, an AI failure doesn't look like a dramatic crash. It looks like a really subtle shift in a baseline.
Exactly. It's one patient being slightly misdiagnosed on a Tuesday, and another being misclassified on a Friday across town.
Just a statistical blip.
It might result in a 2% increase in readmissions over 6 months, spread across thousands of data points. By the time someone notices the statistical anomaly, the harm has already been distributed.
Wow.
Market feedback is far too slow, too indirect, and too asymmetrical to safeguard human lives.
Yeah.
We simply cannot wait for market forces to punish a bad AI system, because the currency of that market feedback is patient harm.
Yeah, that's a really chilling thought. So, since the market obviously won't naturally save us, and the current system is burning out the medical professionals we desperately need, we have to look at the actual blueprint for a responsible future. How do we fix this architectural failure?
Well, the source material argues that accountability does not just emerge naturally in complex systems. It has to be explicitly engineered.
Engineered accountability.
Right. It requires a deliberate architectural commitment from both the technologists building the tools and the hospitals buying them.
What does that actually look like on a practical level?
It requires designing systems with explicit decision ownership at every single stage of the process. There must be clear, well-defined escalation paths.
Okay, so knowing exactly who to call.
Yes. And most importantly, there need to be defined override thresholds.
Override thresholds.
These are points in the software where the system automatically pauses its momentum and demands human judgment before proceeding. Accountability has to flow forward.
Forward to the person making the call.
To the person who actually possesses the power and authority to alter the outcome, not backward to whoever is legally convenient to blame after the fact.
You know, the text also makes a point to clarify that this isn't a Luddite argument, right? Like, this isn't about being anti-technology or rejecting the incredible potential of AI to catch things humans miss.
Oh, not at all. It is simply about refusing to let intelligence outrun responsibility.
That's a great line.
The critical question for the next decade of medicine isn't whether machines can make correct diagnostic decisions. It's whether our institutions are willing to remain accountable when machines make those decisions at a massive scale.
Right.
Algorithmic accuracy is just a technical challenge. Accountability is a moral and institutional choice.
Which brings the focus right back to you listening to this. Because whether you work in healthcare, whether you work in the tech sector, designing software, or whether you are simply a person who, relies on the medical system, you need to look out for this exact mismatch.
It's everywhere.
It really is. Wherever you see intelligent systems creeping into your own professional world, look at the underlying architecture and ask yourself, who holds the responsibility? And who actually possesses the authority? Because if those two things aren't firmly held by the exact same person, you are looking at an illusion.
A dangerous one.
Yeah. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own. We know that the ultimate safeguard in a highly complex, infinitely fast AI system is the human ability to intentionally cause friction.
Pause button.
Exactly, the ability to hit the brakes, to slow the momentum down, and to assert human judgment. But if the future of safety relies on humans having the courage to pause the machine, how do we train the next generation of doctors, nurses, and professionals to confidently hit those brakes when the entire world, their employers, and the very technology they use every single day is relentlessly screaming at them to go faster?